This episode is powered by Act Now Education. Go to www.actnoweducation.com for free comprehensive educational resources and opportunities for active duty, veterans, military spouses, and children.
If you've ever been involved in an explosion, you don't hear it and you don't see it.
No.
It's too fast. Like, it's
Right.
too fast for your body to react, to know how even what's happening, right? I never heard an explosion. I never saw anything. The one memory that I have of that night is I was touching my face, and I know I was like sitting down on the ground and just touching my face, and it was all wet, and I thought that somebody had thrown a bucket of water on me or like a canteen on me, just because I was like, why am I wet? Like, what's going on? Like, who like, did I fall asleep or something? And it turns out that was just blood. Like, I was just drenched in blood.
Warriors fall in. It's time for formation. So today, we're joined with the Marine combat veteran who survived a deadly explosion during his Operation Iraqi Freedom deployment in 2004. This battle-tested warrior continued to fight on through his wounds and successfully transitioned beyond the uniform. He followed his goals and now is a practicing attorney in the state of California, which is no easy task in itself. Passing the California State Bar is considered to be one of the toughest exams in the United States, not to mention the achievement of him earning his Juris Doctorate as well. Today, I'm joined with Estefan Encarnacion. Sir, I want to thank you for joining us on the Morning Formation podcast today.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for the invitation.
Listen, the honor is all on this end of the microphone. And before the podcast started rolling, we were kind of talking about our time during deployment. We were in Iraq around the same time, but we were in complete different areas. Right. And you told me a little bit about what you did when you were in the Marines, but let's take it back to the beginning. Would you mind telling our audience where you're originally from and why you decided to choose the Marines over all other branches?
Is a little convoluted. It's not the straight path to the Marine Corps. So I was actually born in Costa Rica. My mother is Costa Rican, and my father, he's a New Yorican, right? So he's actually, he was born in the Bronx in New York, but his whole family is Puerto Rican. My parents met in New York, but then decided to come down to Costa Rica, which is where I was born. Ultimately, then my parents separated early on, which then moved my mom to California. So by the time I was 2 years old, we were living in California. My dad was a Marine. He was drafted into Vietnam. Actually, so before he got drafted, he actually volunteered. He knew he was going to get drafted, so he just volunteered anyways. So he had joined the Marine Corps during his time when he was 18. Right. His job in the Marine Corps was in comms, specifically with the air unit. So he was working on the comms for jets. That's what he was assigned to. I don't know if we actually ever saw any combat or not. My father has been diagnosed with schizophrenia, amongst other mental illnesses, since I ever knew him. Right. So, despite all of that, my mother and I, and my stepdad, we eventually moved back to Costa Rica. And so I actually did all my high school years there. Right? So by the time I was ready to graduate, I was like, look, I love Costa Rica. Costa Rica is awesome. But I really don't see myself like earning a living and making it there. I want to come back to the US and I want to like do my own thing, right? Like I want to be independent. I wanted to just establish myself and not have to rely on my parents for anything like that, right? I had always kept in touch with my dad, so he was helpful in that regard. But he definitely discouraged me from joining the Marine Corps. He was like, "Son, don't do it. Like, don't. It's not. You go straight to college. Like, you don't need to do this, right?" So he always kind of discouraged it from me from joining. But that was, I don't know, since I was like 15 years old, probably, I started, like trying to figure out, like, how am I gonna kind of be able to become independent on my own, right? Like, stand on my own 2 feet. I don't want to rely on my parents for their help. I seen the struggle this whole time, and their hustle, their struggle, that's for them. Like, that's for them to, take advantage of and benefit from. Let me do my own thing. And so that's kind of what led me to this straight up, like, I had it in my mind, I'm not going to do anything else except join the Marine Corps as soon as I graduate from high school. And over there in Costa Rica, we graduate at the end of the year, so in December. So in December of 2000, that's when I graduated, and literally in less than 30 days, paid for a flight, to come to California, and went to the nearest recruiter, took the ASVAB test. I scored pretty high on the ASVAB, so the recruiter was like, "Here's the whole book, do whatever you want." I was like, I shut the recruiter's book down. I was like, "Look, I just want to be in the infantry." He was like, "You're a hard charger, son. I'm gonna make sure that you get a stripe as soon as you get out of boot camp." And so I got a PFC. I was a PFC out of boot camp. Right. I joined in January of 2001. So literally, a few days after graduating from MCRD. And I didn't know all the jobs, right, of being in the infantry, but I definitely knew that that's the one thing that I wanted to do. I always figured if I'm going to join the Marine Corps, that I might as well, be a badass, right?
Right.
And actually, like, earn my, like, that's how I felt about it. I wanted to make my life difficult, and I wanted to push myself physically in a way that I've never done, because up to that point, all I ever did was play soccer. And so this was going to be a different, plus I was kind of burnt out from high school, in the sense that I went to a college preparatory high school. They had this thing called an International Baccalaureate. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No.
And so an International Baccalaureate it's a special set of classes that you take. They're almost equivalent to like AP classes, right, here in the US. And so it's like as if you only took AP classes during your last 3 years of high school. And so that's what I decided to do. So I got a bachelor's or an international diploma, right, that I could go to any high school in any across the country or across the world, basically. But I was kind of burnt out, right? Like, so this was not a regular high school. This was an actual college preparatory. Right. And so I was just like, let me just take a break and let me just join the Marine Corps while I'm at it, And then, once I graduated boot camp, then I could choose my job, and I chose to be a machine gunner. And so I landed it. Like, I guess there wasn't that many people applying to be machine gunners at the time. So I definitely got what I signed up for. This was all before 9/11, right? Like, this is all during peacetime. There hasn't been any wars for years, right? Like, there hasn't been any active military hot zones that anybody was getting deployed to. So I figured, this is just going to be a great training program for the next 4 years. And then obviously 9/11 happened a few months later, and that's when everything kind of flipped the script, right?
Right. Yeah, it changed a lot. It changed a lot, actually. I joined in 1999, and that was way before September 11th, obviously. So, with every basic training, every recruit class that comes through, I think every branch, they always do that thing where, like, a couple weeks into it, they bring everyone into the room, and you're kind of cut off from society, you don't know what's going on. So then they make up this story about we're going to war, and it just is, it's supposed to like invoke this emotion in you, right? And so they did that to us in 1999, but it was the real deal Holyfield with you when you joined. Now, you were still not in boot camp at that time, right? You were already out of boot camp when September 11th hit?
I was already in the fleet. I was already with my unit. When I joined the Marine Corps, I never knew. I only thought that the Marine Corps had bases next to the sea, right? And so little did I know that there's a beautiful base called 29 Palms.
Oh, boy.
That's in the middle of the nowhere, right? In the middle of the Mojave Desert. And that was good. That was my station. That was my duty station for that time.
That's what I love about it the most, I think. And I got to ask you, Estefan, because you went in the Marines and it was Marines or nothing, right? And so with you having the type of education that you had at the time, you must have scored really well on the ASVAB.
I scored like a 96 on the ASVAB.
Wow. And so you could have went Air Force, Navy, if you had known to even look in that direction, right? I bet you the Marine recruiters were salivating when you showed up.
They were. Yeah. They were like, you're a hard charger. Like, we've never seen this. Like, this is right. Like, I mean, he's like, you can do any job in the Marine Corps, like any job. Just choose any job. Like, no, I don't want to do it. I just want to be in the infantry, bro. Like, I just want to just go through the hard shit, like earn my shit.
Wow. That is hardcore, man. I mean, you didn't have to go that route, but you chose to go that route. Now, when you went into the Marines, did you have goals of going to college and utilizing the GI Bill and all that stuff, or did you even know anything about that?
Definitely. Like that's the part of the whole thing, right? Like, I wanted to be able to afford my own life, right? Like, I was very grateful for my parents and like the opportunities that they gave me, but I saw my parents struggle. And we struggled. Like, we were poor. Like, when I was growing up here in California, like, you know, we lived in Inglewood during the early 90s, early 80s. That was a dangerous place to live at during that period of time. I mean,
during the riots.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I lived in the ghetto. Like, we were poor. Like, I remember my parents we would go to the park to like play basketball or anything like that. And then after we're done playing basketball, we'd have to get a bag and go through all the garbage cans to collect cans and shit, right? Like, it was a normal thing for us, for me at least, right? But,
right.
You know, in retrospect, I was like, damn, we were poor as hell, you know? Like, we were like, this is how we had to scrap, you know, to get by. And so I saw that struggle with my parents and I appreciated it, but, you know, I always felt like, you know, that's for them. You know, I have a sister that's 10 years younger than I. So I didn't want to like feel like an extra burden for them. That's why I wanted to try and become independent as possible. And yeah, getting the GI Bill was like the number one thing. Like, okay, I can, you know, through my dad, because my dad was service disabled, so I learned that if I were to attend any public college in California, that it would get a tuition fee reduction based on his percentage of disability, and he was 100%. So I knew that I could kind of bank on that plus the GI Bill would be enough to carry me through at least the bachelor's degree. So yeah, I definitely, you know, made sure that I was going to benefit from that experience, right? Which is a little difficult. I realized when you're stationed at 29 Palms and there ain't nothing out there to do except get in trouble. So I was one of the very few guys from my platoon to actually get a good conduct medal. Out of over 100 people, only 5 of us got it. I was one of those 5. So it was a lot of troublemakers in my platoon. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean that's how it normally is. You know, a bunch of young folks in the Marines out away from home, getting paid a paycheck. They have barracks with staying with other people their own age, like what's
Right.
to be expected. And for folks out there that don't know, 29 Palms is like next to Joshua Tree National Park. It's literally in the high desert. It's hot. There's nothing out there except for reptiles and cactus, basically. And it's definitely, I don't know how you could possibly get in trouble out there. I guess there's creative ways that Marines can figure it out, and probably some Army folks too, right?
Yeah, well, the easiest way of getting in trouble was just because of disrespecting your seniors and not obeying lawful orders, right? Like getting kind of a lot of fraternization, right? So it was pretty rowdy in those days. And then so when 9/11 happened, we were out in the field and doing an exercise, and that's kind of, we had already been out in the field for like almost a whole week. And then we got the news through the radio, and then our battalion commander, and we had some guys from the East Coast, so they're like, you guys need to call home and make sure that your people are okay. But from that point on, that was like, the whole thing was like, all right, gents, like, we're the tip of the spear, we're the premier desert trained unit for the Marine Corps. Know for a fact that any deployment, it's going to be us, right? So, but by that time we had already kind of been well indoctrinated and well trained to, like, I don't think there was that many people. We had some deserters. Like, as soon as that news broke out, a handful of people were out. They bounced. They went AWOL, right? And so that was a handful of people, but the rest of us, we were kind of like pumped, to be honest with you. Like, we were like, all right, cool, like, let's do it. Like, this is what we trained for,
Yeah, at the time I was enlisted in the National Guard. We had the same thing too, where you had those guys that were in for like 20, 25 years or whatever, and they were legacy E4s. They were just there doing their 1 week in a month deal. And as soon as September 11th happened and people started getting deployed, then the next year you started seeing the numbers start to drop, and people were just getting out, going AWOL or whatever. And
that's crazy.
We experienced the same thing on my end. Now, so Estefan, when you did deploy to Iraq in 2004, you deployed in early 2004 in around February. Where were you deployed to, and what was your job while you were there? What rank were you at that time?
So I was the corporal at that time. And so when we got to Iraq, actually we got we first landed in Kuwait, which is south of Iraq. And so we had to do a whole battalion trail through from the southern tip of Iraq all the way through Baghdad, all the way through it took about 4 days.
You had a convoy through basically into country and all the way up to where you were going.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy, because you're like, damn, we're like getting inserted into a combat zone and we have to drive through it.
and not only that, but like back when you went through, that's before the level 3 Tardak armor was mandatory to be outside the wire. So you were dealing with ghetto metal and what we called ghetto metal and sandbags, which is basically you weld your own reinforcement steel onto your own vehicles and you throw sandbags on the floor, and there is no windows. There's just a hole next to you and you just kind of lean back out of the way, right?
Brother, we did not have any upgraded armor. Right? Remember, we're the Marine Corps, right? We get all the scraps, we get the leftovers. We barely had sandbags to put in our floorboards to tamper the blow or whatever. But we had no upgraded side panels. We didn't even have bulletproof windshields when we were traveling. We got that months later.
Yeah.
So with my particular unit, I was always the lead vehicle, and I was the driver. I was always the driver for the lead vehicle. That's kind of like the relationship that I had with our little squad commander, which is a sergeant. Him and I kind of rose through the ranks together. So he trusted me a lot with my ability to think on my own, right?
Right.
Be the lead vehicle driver. So that was basically my job, and we have a full Humvee we had a 50 cal, and our gunner. Driving through country was a very interesting experience. I mean, you see camels on the side of the road. I've never seen like it was just a totally. I mean, I thought joining the Marine Corps was a culture shock. Like driving through Iraq was like a whole nother experience, right?
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying, and I can't imagine like what that must have been like, because your job was to patrol and clear the routes, like for your AO, right?
Right. That was our assignment. We had 12-hour patrols every other day, and our job. I mean, they needed to see us, and we had to, whether we had resupply or not of ammo, whether we got shot at, whether we engaged or not. We would have to, surveil the route, and basically kind of act like guinea pigs to draw out the enemy, particularly to draw out the IEDs, the roadside bombs, because that was like our main thing, was to make sure that to catch any people putting the roadside bombs, or if we see something fishy on the side of the road, to call EOD out to come and to dismantle the bombs. Before my accident happened, we had already survived about 4 IED blasts that either like it would just blow up right in front of us or like right behind us, right? These blasts occur in areas like there's desolate, like there's just like, all right, you see the explosion, and then what do you do? Like, because there's like no one for miles, right?
Right.
Like these guys who were using cell phones and would be like behind a hill, a mile or 2 away, and would like call it in with, you'd be able to detonate it remotely.
How long was it? So February, you arrived in Iraq, and then how long was it until you had your incident with the big explosion that actually took you out of deployment?
Yeah, so actually, the anniversary was not too long ago. The accident actually happened on July 19th of 2004, which I didn't realize is Father's Day. At least this year it was. So that was about 4 months after I had arrived. We were supposed to be there for 8 months total, right? In that 4-month period, our battalion or our platoon had already suffered a handful of casualties already from either an IED or someone got shot and passed away. So we had already kind of dealt with a little bit of that, right? Like that loss. Leaving the wire. Every time we left, like and I'm sure it's kind of like the military way of doing things, I guess, is that, you gotta have a good time while you're out there, because you just never know if you're going to come back or not. Right. And so we're all a bunch of young guys. Right. So all we did was just bust each other's nuts all the time, just crack on each other for silly things. Right. That's how you make sense of it. Right. Like how you can actually live through this. Because, we would get shot at. It's hard to like want to react in a super aggressive manner, knowing that it's almost impossible to figure out who you're shooting at. And I don't want to be accused of being a war criminal, right? So, right, the rules of engagement, right? We always have to respect the rules of engagement. I took that serious, right? I was very conscious of the fact, like, we're wearing a uniform, but dude, we're in a totally different country, right? And it was ideologically speaking, it was no one ever, while you're there, I don't think any one of us ever really had that conversation or that, like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we even here? Like, no one really thought of that. We all just knew we were there, right? Like, well, we're here. We just need to survive, right? Like, let's just do what we need to do so we don't get our asses chewed and, survive the mission and come back to base. Like, that's basically what we were doing. But yeah, I mean, that experience, like, it kind of, I don't know how many people are ready to die, but we definitely were, right?
Yeah.
And it's just not something that you really contemplate, though, right? And one thing is dying. And I guess, this is the one thing for sure I never thought, and maybe you share the same feeling. I never thought that. I would always think either I survive or I die, not that I will survive and be mangled for the rest of my life, or that I'll be, disabled, or, not have my five senses, or I'll have like a missing limbs and stuff like that. That's something that I never thought of. I never, ever thought of, being a disabled vet.
Right.
If that makes any sense, right? I'd rather have died in glorious combat, right? Like, that's kind of like the...
No, I totally feel you on that, man. I understand what you're saying 100%. Yeah. And, some of us were fortunate to have gone through some very serious, violent IED attacks, small arms fire, RPG, and some of us were witnessed it as well. I'd like to know how far deep you'd like to dive into the incident that you had, that the IED that you hit that actually sent you home and took out some of your fellow Marines.
We can dive into it 100%. So that day, we had a very particular mission, which was to drop off some snipers. So snipers are attached to the weapons company that we're in. And so the job was to transport the snipers to their mission, drop them off, and maintain contact with them, radio contact. And so we had done that. In order to accomplish that mission, their squad leader, let's call, or unit leader, had to roll with us, right? And so he was a staff sergeant sniper platoon leader. He had already been served for 12 years. He had a wife and kids. His name was Staff Sergeant Best. And so Staff Sergeant Best was assigned to my vehicle and sat behind me. So we accomplished the mission of dropping off. It was like maybe 5 or 6 snipers. And then from there, we were going to head to our listening post, or our observation post, which was going to be on top of a little hill, maybe like 2 or 3 clicks away. And so it was on the way up to that hill, right? This was like a hill that was off the side of the road, not too far from the road, but it's definitely a hill that we had used in the past, right? And it was kind of, I guess, an obvious thing that we would use it again. And so it was.
So they knew.
So they knew. I mean, it was kind of, we made it easy for them, right? This was during, like, in the dead of the middle of the night. So it was probably like maybe 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. And the only reason why that I survived was because I was actually wearing my helmet that night, because, during the daytime, wearing your helmet inside a Humvee is just unimaginable, right? Like, the heat, your brain will fry, literally. And so we never wore a helmet. Like, we never, ever wore our helmets. The only reason why we wore our helmets was because we were, using our night vision goggles attached to the helmet. And so I was driving, with our NVGs on, and you drive slow. You can't really drive fast, especially in the when you're out in the field. So I was creeping up the side of the roads, up the hill, and that's pretty much my last memory. What ended up happening was the rear tire, the rear driver's side tire of the Humvee went right over what they told us later was a double stacked anti-tank landmine.
Oh my God.
Uh, and so had it been the front tire, I wouldn't be here. No, I don't think any of us would have survived the front tire. But the back tire, most of the explosion generated outside of the vehicle, not right underneath the vehicle. But with that said, the staff sergeant, when you sit in the back, you're literally, your ass is right over the wheel well of that vehicle. And so the staff sergeant, he passed away immediately, like instantly. Um, his body was mush, essentially, from what I remember kind of hearing. But so, if you've ever been involved in an explosion, you don't hear it and you don't see it.
No.
It's too fast. Like, it's too
Right.
fast for your body to react, to know how even what's happening, right? I never heard an explosion. I never saw anything. The one memory that I have of that night is I was touching my face, and I know I was like sitting down on the ground and just touching my face, and it was all wet, and I thought that somebody had thrown a bucket of water on me or like a canteen on me, just because I was like, why am I wet? Like, what's going on? Like, who like, did I fall asleep or something? And it turns out that was just blood. Like, I was just drenched in blood. So because I was the driver, and the blast was from behind, the force of that basically shoved my face right into the windshield. And we had bulletproof windshield at that time, finally. So you don't go through that, right? You just slam into it. And so the force of that explosion made every single bone in my face fracture. I still have a major scar line from ear to ear. That was for them to pull down my skin and to repair my forehead. So my forehead was cracked in two places. My whole nose is made out of metal. My cheekbones were fractured. My upper palate was fractured. My jaw was fractured in 3 places, and I had a fractured vertebrae. You don't feel any of that. I had to have, because of the trauma was to my face and to my breathing, they had to do an emergency tracheotomy because the swelling would have prevented me, and the coughing of the blood and all that stuff would have choked me, right? And so I had to have a tracheotomy on the field. Once I had an opportunity to like sit back and touch my face and realize that I wasn't moving, and I was kind of in that instant. I was like, okay, well, I don't know what happened to me. I don't know what happened, but I'm pretty sure I'm going home. And that was kind of like, once I did hear the medevac, like I heard the helicopter coming by, whizzing over us. And that's kind of like the last memory before I wake up in the hospital. Like I knew something serious happened, right? I do remember vividly someone saying like, Staff Sergeant is dead, like he's gone, he passed away. But I could never confirm that information, right? Like, that was kind of like the challenge, is that you never expect this, right, to happen. Like, yeah, you kind of hear of it, you see other people go through it, but you never expect for it to happen to you. I was very fortunate the way that the accident happened for me. I was next on the list to not be here. Basically, had it not been for the amazing jobs that everybody in the medical field, did. It's crazy. In my whole entire life, I had never been in a hospital, ever, not for anything. And this was my first experience, right, to be hospitalized. The one thing that they don't necessarily prepare you for is that one day you're like, you're chumming it up with your buddies, like you rely on each other, you count on each other, like you're in the thick of it all, like just completely reliant on each other to survive. And then instantly you're gone from that. Like I felt so powerless that I couldn't do anything to be there for my buddies. You know, like I felt like I was unjustifiably torn away from them. Like I couldn't. That was a hard thing to go through. Like you're trained so much that you don't even think about yourself, even though you're still recovering from your injury. Like how can I actually be there? Like I shouldn't be here all fucked up. I should be there with my buddies in fucking combat, right? Like I should be there for them. And that's just some it's a weird something. It's unique, right? Like you will never have that experience with anyone else, right? Or for any other people. And then, having to learn on my own that Staff Sergeant I confirmed the Staff Sergeant's death on that website that lists all the people who have passed away during combat. I saw his name, and that's when it really hit me because I had huge survivor's guilt. I felt, I had to reconcile the fact that I was the driver and that it wasn't my fault that I went over a landmine, right? Like that's just some shit, like some silly stuff that you should never even have to think like that. But you're so trained, you're like everything has a concept, like everything you replay it in your mind. Like, what could I have done different? Like, could I swerve this way or that? Like, there's so many ways of trying to justify the death of the staff sergeant that you just drive yourself insane. And long story short, I was already at the end of my deployment, or not my service. That happened in the third year of service. So I was hospitalized for a total of 3.5 months. But they patched me up. Right. It was a 24-hour surgery, basically, with 8 different specialists. They did everything to put me back together. My mouth was wired shut for about 2 months. And then when I woke up, I was actually my eyes were still so swollen that I couldn't even see. So I wake up in a hospital mute because I can't talk, and blind. I can't see anything. And the first thought that came to my head, and I'm sure you've heard this song before too, is Metallica's "The One."
Mm-hmm.
That was the first thought that came to my mind. I was like, fuck, I'm like this guy from that fucking music video. And that was horrible. Right. Because I had no idea how long I had to recover. I had no idea if I had any limbs or not. Like I couldn't tell anything. Right. That was pretty difficult to kind of go through. But we had a Marine Corps liaison in the hospital, and their sole purpose in life is to make your life better. Right. Like whatever little comfort that they can do for you, like those Marines that were there. The whole hospital staff, like, was just amazing, right? Like, yeah. I've never experienced that level of care in my life, right? Like,
and they were there. This was at Walter Reed, right?
Yeah, this was Walter Reed. So back in the day, it used to be called the National Naval Medical Center. And so, we had Navy docs and taking care of you and the corpsman and the Marine Corps liaison. Like I was very fortunate. I was extremely fortunate that my parents and my sister was on vacation from school. She was, she's 10 years younger than I am. So she was in middle school. My parents could afford to walk away from their jobs. Basically they were there the whole entire time. Like I saw my parents, and my sister, for the whole 3 months that I was there, they were there. And not everybody had that. In fact, I was probably the only one who had that benefit of having my family be there. In the hospital, like, that's where I saw like really fucked up people, like that, like real, that they will never recover. Like there's no amount of physical therapy like I never, I was very, very, very fortunate. Like, right. You just don't realize it, while you're there.
Wow. I mean, that's you've been through a lot, man, and you're very positive about a lot of your misfortunes and kind of seeing the glass as being half full a lot of times. I mean, you were blown up, sent home, put in a coma for quite a while, and then when you woke up, you had all this surgery done to you, couldn't see, and you're still thankful that your parents were there when so many other folks didn't have the same opportunity as you. And that's a good mentality to have to keep yourself sane.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It was even the doctors were like, the fact that you had your family with you, that helps your body to, like, it makes you want to recover so you can get the hell out of here and go back and do your, resume your life.
Right.
I was very blessed and fortunate that I had that. I probably wouldn't have had a speedy recovery had it not been for that.
So once you did recover, once you did get out of the hospital and you were out of the Marines, at what point did you decide to go to attend college? And
immediately. Like,
okay.
That was, again, like I was on a hiatus, right? I was on in my mind, a break from a much needed break from the rigorous academic life that I had given myself already. What I didn't realize is that 4 years is a long damn time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I know like the Army offers 2 years, or at least they used to, right? 2-year contracts. Yeah. But in retrospect, I was like, damn, 4 years is freaking 4 years. That's like, it doesn't go by quick, especially when you're stationed in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
But to be honest with you, the what inspired me the most is really when Staff Sergeant Pat, like, I couldn't believe me, like I never, and this probably happens to a lot of people. I never went to seek therapy. I never went to get mental health treatment. You would be seen as
right,
right? Like
weak, and everything else, and right.
I should have done that a long time ago, but I never wanted to have the staff sergeant's death be in vain. I felt it was my moral obligation to ensure that I do something good and I do something worthy in my life to ensure that his death was worth something, right? And so it inspired me to really excel. And I went straight to college. I enrolled in Cal State San Bernardino. That was the nearest university that I could go to, and I just went head in 100%. I never actually until after I finished my bachelor's degree, but during this whole time, I never thought that was, my whole thing was I wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to be a doctor. The doctors that saved my life and repaired, like, I was eternally grateful to them. And I was, I felt like I had the capacity to do that, that I could also give back and that I could also, save someone else's life. And I wanted to be an ER doctor, right? Like that's what I was kind of shooting for. So my undergrad, I overloaded every single class, right? Every single semester. At Cal State, they do quarters. So I overloaded every quarter system. Yeah, I didn't realize either that the GI Bill, at least, the regular GI Bill, not the post 9/11. The GI Bill only gave you 36 months of benefits. That's only 3 years. Most college degrees are 4-year programs.
4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah. So I didn't realize that you were still getting screwed after the fact. I was like, damn it. All right, I got to finish this shit quick then. That's why I overloaded every single opportunity I had. But I ended up finishing with a bachelor's degree in anthropology and a minor in pre-med biology. with the idea that once I finish, I was gonna have the opportunity to sit down and take my time to study for the MCAT, right? So the medical college admission test, because that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a doctor. I graduated in 2008, and that's like right when the market crashed, right? And one of the things that they don't necessarily prepare you for is that once you finish your GI Bill, like it's done. Like there's no more, like you're done with school, then you're done getting paid. And
Right.
that was kind of a shocking realization, because I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's not all right. I know it's gonna finish up, but I'm just gonna get a job, right? I can get any job just so I can study, right? That job never came because the market destroyed everything and no one was hiring. And at that time, I was like, well, what was my experience at that time? Well, I was a machine gunner in the infantry in the Marine Corps, and I have a degree in anthropology. Who the hell is going to hire me for what? Right? I felt like I shot myself in the foot. Like I was like, damn, I started like thinking back, like, man, I should have chosen a better job while I was in the Marine Corps. Like I had like zero life skills. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, be a security guard? Like, or go back and like join the police force? Like, I already went through trauma in my life. I never want to put myself in that position again, where I'm gonna, get blown up or get injured for someone else's benefit. Right? I just I was done putting myself at risk, which is something that you don't think of. Like you just don't think of it like that when you're in it.
I really think what you're talking about right now too, it underlines the extreme importance to have a mentor, to have someone that can lead you and guide you to not take the long route, but take the shorter route and be a little bit more, I guess, pointed whenever you are moving in a direction. I mean, you did a lot of great things and you were progressing and moving, but I really feel like you kind of went about things sort of the long way and then realized, oh, what did I just do? And that's why one of the reasons why I started the morning formation, because I wanted to provide that guidance,
so much. I'm a first gen everything. Well, I'm not military, but I'm a first gen. Yeah. I mean, funny story. From my mom's side of the family, I'm the only person to ever join the military. From my dad's side, which I've never even, like, my dad never had a relationship with his family, so hence I didn't have one. But from my dad's side of the family, everybody was in the military, which is something that, like I never really had anybody to guide me through the military. I never, I was a first generation college student. My parents never went to college. This is a lot of self-guidance. And then you add the fact that you're in the Marine Corps, you want to be self-reliant, right? It's like, you never want to seek help. And that's just the worst advice that you can ever follow, right? No, dude, get help, ask questions. Like, it doesn't matter if you think you're going to look stupid or whatever. Like, just do it, bro. Like, you're going to, it's going to be so much easier for yourself and really not just for yourself, but for your future, right? Like, for your children and whoever you're really doing anything for, right? Like, I'm all for like having a difficult experience and learning from it, but not at the expense. Right? It's expensive.
And if it's not necessary, it's not necessary. And to some extent, I was my own worst enemy too. Like I wasn't out trying to find mentors to help me transition out of the military at all. Like I was doing it on my own. As a matter of fact, I think 2 weeks ago, I was in a podcast and I mentioned how I avoided taps. Like I purposely went in there on the last day and just said, hey, sign, because I was a captain. I just walked in there and said, hey, sign this. Like, oh, well, you didn't go through any. Well, I don't want to. Like, just sign it. I'm out of here. I'm done. And they did. And I regret it.
That's so crazy you mention it because, I was enlisted, right? Like the whole officer side, like that's just a whole nother world that you can fathom, right? Like, and you just don't, you always, it's just such a different thing, right? Like we never fraternized, right, outside of being in our unit, and so it was never. It was always felt like a different. Like I felt like you guys had it like figured out.
Yeah,
right?
no, not at all. Not at all. I was probably my own worst enemy, actually. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I was hot shit. Like I thought, oh, I'll come back from Iraq, I'll get my graduate's degree, and then I'll leave, and then everybody in the world's going to want to hire me because I was an army officer and I was in Iraq. And that wasn't the case at all. It was like when I got out, it was like, so what did you do in the military? And what is that? Like having to explain that in layman's terms was very difficult for me. And like I said, I avoided TAPS. I avoided any kind of transition out of the military because I wanted to do it on my own. So yeah, that wasn't exactly how it plays out for the officer side. But now for you, when you finished up your undergrad, now at what point did you decide to become an attorney?
Yeah, so almost a year had passed from when I graduated to where, again, so my parents had stayed in Costa Rica after I got out. And so again, like I never wanted to rely on them to help me out. I just wanted to do my own thing and be like a self-made person, right? So I didn't have any financial assistance anymore. Like I was just burning through my credit cards, using one credit card to pay another credit card. Like I was fortunate enough at the time to have purchased a home, but I wasn't paying the mortgage anymore. Like everything was just going slowly, just deteriorating to where almost a year passed from when I graduated. And then my girlfriend at the time, she had always wanted to be a lawyer. And so she was the one who's like, look, Estefan, I don't see you studying for the MCAT. Why don't you try the LSAT? Like, you can be a lawyer. And, if your goal is that you want to help people, you can still do that as an attorney. And that never crossed my mind ever at all, ever in my life, right? I always thought that attorneys were the lowest of the low, and that it wasn't even like a real challenge to do this. I was like, nah, attorney compared to medical doctor, like there's a difference here, right? Like, but I wasn't studying for the MCAT. I knew that for sure. So I was like, okay, well, fuck it, let's just do it. Let me just study for this LSAT real quick. And see what happens. I mean, I never, she's like, but I put up excuses because I was like, well, I didn't even get a degree in anything related to the law. And she was like, no, like law schools don't give a crap about what you got your undergrad in. Like they just want to know that you got an undergrad, period. I was like, well, what about this test? Like this test I'm sure is going to ask something about the law. It's like, no, this LSAT doesn't ask you a freaking thing about the law at all. Like all it is just analytical reading comprehension, logic games, and speed. Like you just got to be able to think quick under pressure. I was like, all right, well, I think I can do this. I mean, it's a good challenge. So
I think that defines you altogether. I mean, you're intelligent when you left high school. You did all those great things like decisions on your feet when you're in the Marines. I mean,
yeah. So literally, I had about 3 weeks to study for the LSAT. And I took some of their practice exams and their little tests in here and there. And I had 3 weeks to prepare for it. So I took the test and I scored pretty decently on it. And the only college that was accepting applications at the time was Laverne here in Laverne, but actually the law school is in Ontario. Mm-hmm. And I applied with them and they shot me back saying, you know what, we would love to have you. And not only that, but we want to offer you a 95% scholarship to come to our law school.
Wow.
So I was like, well,
now,
I mean, I guess I'm not going to be an idiot to reject that offer.
Did that have anything to do with your veteran status, or was it just because of your test scores?
It was mostly the LSAT. I mean, I think the veteran status helped a bit, but law schools are like that. They focus heavily on your LSAT and your undergrad, your GPA. But it was mostly the LSAT. So okay. I scored a 160 on the LSAT, which is a pretty good score to get. Like to get into elite schools like Harvard and Yale, they want a 170. And so I wasn't that far, for a first time, thing that I only had 3 weeks to prepare for. But once that letter came back and they offered me a scholarship to go to law school, I was all in. I mean, I wasn't gonna, I was very appreciative of the fact, and I realized that this just doesn't happen to everybody, right?
Right.
I'm lucky, I made the effort, obviously, but one thing is getting in, the next thing is surviving it, and then actually becoming an attorney, right? There's steps to this, right?
Right.
And at the same time, along the way, you gotta be a good boy, because you can't have any criminal history that's gonna mess up your dreams, right? And so, mind you, this whole entire period of time, I still haven't received any therapy. I never went to see a psychologist or to get any mental health treatment. I was just dealing with my own demons still. And that was almost 10 years after the fact. I finally got therapy, and, it was kind of a breakthrough. I guess maybe after my first or second year of law school, I finally was able to I was like, you know what? I think I need to talk to somebody about this, instead of just keeping it all. I need to make sense out of this, right? It needs to come out, and I think that was a pretty, because I can talk about it so easily, right? And that helped me quite a bit. But I didn't have, again, right? It's first gen. You treat yourself like shit, so you never seek any help. You never ask. You never raise your hand. You always just want to be in the background, not to embarrass yourself or whatever. So, and then I come to realize after the fact, there's a ton of resources for first generation students and for veterans, right? I never thought of it, right? I never wanted to use my veteran status to get ahead in life. It was no, that was something that I did for me, I volunteered, right? I wasn't drafted into. It's a different.
Yeah, definitely, and I understand that 100%. And I also know that when you transition out of the military, just like when I talked about TAPS and just saying, here, sign this and let me get out of here. Right. It was the same deal with the whole mental evaluation side of it as well. It was the same deal where you go and talk to the counselors and you're like, yeah, I'm fine. Just sign this and let me go. I'm good. Just leave me alone. I want to get out of here. And so I think that's how we all handled that. Right after we were trying to get out, we just wanted to move on with our lives. Cause it took me a while too. I literally took my desert uniforms, all my class A's, my dress blues, and I threw them away. I literally threw them in the dumpster because I just got tired of feeling like this was not me anymore. And I needed to move on with my life. And so it took me a while to come around as well. And we talked about, honestly, your life you've done great things with your life, outstanding things. You overcame so much, but just imagine how far you would have gone if you just had mentorship from the beginning.
Exactly. So I've been practicing law for 8 years now. It's almost, in 2 years, it'll be a 20-year anniversary from my accident. And if I had a mentor in my life, I would have definitely, I'd be in a different position. Totally. I'd be in a totally different position, right? A much better position. And I'm sure your father and family members were mentors for you, but I'm talking about a career mentor, somebody that's already in it or just a little bit ahead of you is what I'm talking about. And do you do any mentoring now, or have you? I think you would be a great mentor. Have you? Yeah, I haven't necessarily had the opportunity to be a mentor to anyone in particular, but I would love to help, right? I would love that opportunity to do that. I think it's my experience doesn't need to necessarily be relived, right?
Right. Yeah, and there's definitely some good platforms out there. Like there's a Veterati. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
I'm not familiar with any dude. Like once I got into this career, into this field, like I'm just been like a one-track pony like mindset. Like I just need to be successful. I need to do right. I need to learn the law. I need to practice. Like I need to, I have two partners, and so I'm like the managing partner of our small firm out here, just trying to hustle and make a living like everyone else, right? Like this is a business at the end of the day. It's not a charity, but at the same time, you still want to do good and do good for your clients and do good for the community.
Right.
It's a challenge. Like, so being an attorney is not for the faint-hearted. Like this is where you really get to make an impact in people's lives, and you make a huge impact, right? Like you're helping people in the most difficult life or period of their life, in the sense that no one wants to come to court because they love it, right? Like everyone's here because of a problem. And this is kind of where like the battle continues, right? Like me being a Marine, I still get to advocate. I still get to fight for what I believe is right? Which is a great opportunity for me to get that out of my system, or to actually be able to live it, right? I think a lot of us, especially people who we're in the infantry or who are have that desire, that spirit to fight, or to have that energy to want to make a difference in this world, and to see things that you can play a part in this process, right? That you can actually make an impact in people's lives.
That's what I love about you, is that you're enlisted Marine infantry, and now you're a practicing California attorney, which, like I mentioned before, passing that bar is no easy task, man. That's a huge challenge. It's like the toughest bar in the United States, right? And
it is, in fact, like when you pass it, the state bar issues you a letter saying you have passed the most difficult bar exam throughout the 50 states.
I love how accomplished you are. I love that you agreed to come on the podcast today, because now you're exposed. You are going to be a mentor, and I hope that folks reach out to you. Because I mean, honestly, all the things that you went through in your own life should not be, in vain. I definitely would love for you to reach back and help out, folks coming up behind you, Marines. If you're a Marine listening to this podcast right now,
I always have a preference, a special place in my heart for Marines, obviously, but any service is worth it, bro. I mean, we all go through the same shit.
What's interesting is when I was a captain at the battalion, I was the S3 training officer. I had an E4 work for me back then, and I would tell him the same thing too. At the time I was getting my graduate's degree, and I was trying to talk him into going into the education center. And long story short, today he's a practicing attorney in the state of New York. And
nice.
He got his commission. He did his time as a field artillery officer. He got his Juris Doctorate after he got out of the Army. And today he's a practicing. I'm very proud of him. Very proud of him. I keep in touch with him today.
This out, this is like the most interesting thing. So from my actual weapons company, like from my unit, during the period of time that I was there are 4 practicing attorneys that we were all enlisted. So I had one guy from my platoon, Johnny Hayes. He's an attorney in Michigan. I had a guy from the 81s, the Mortarmen. He's an attorney in Kansas and Florida. And then we had a senior in my unit, machine gunner. He's also an attorney in Tennessee. And it's just so funny to me that all these like crazy rowdy guys that I knew exactly who they were and what they did we all came up to be attorneys, years after the fact. But it's like people have a misconception about people who join the infantry. it's not just for rocks and like, yeah, it's not for the dummies. Like there's a lot of smart people who volunteer to be there.
Right.
I'm not the only one. Like I have my buddy from Cameroon. Like this guy is now or was he has a master's in engineering, and he used to work for the patent office. Right. Like it's not,
Right.
this is a choice, right? We actively choose to do this, right? I mean, obviously, if your ADSVAB score is kind of low, then your choices are
You got to be in that case. You got to be persistent. Right.
Right. But it was such a good experience to be with the guys in my unit. Like you just just the random.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears for sure. Working with folks that you would probably never had met in your entire life had you not joined the military. And and that's what I love about folks like you and your battle buddies that were downrange as well is, you guys are all accomplished professionals now. And at one time you had each other's backs, and I'm so fortunate to have linked up with you, Estefan. And I love your story, man, overall. But if we were to wrap everything up here at the end, what piece of advice would you offer to any of our listeners, whether they're in uniform or they're currently a veteran right now?
It's always it's a challenge to really have that foresight as far as like what your MOS is. I mean, here's for sure, like don't let your MOS be like your guiding force for the rest of your life. Like you don't have to live in that box, right?
Right.
That's one phase of life that you chose, right? Like that we chose to do, but we don't have to be limited to that little box and whatever jobs are suited for that MOS after the fact as a civilian. Number one.
Right.
Number two, definitely take advantage of your GI Bill. Like, your post 9/11 GI Bill is a gift from like there's so many benefits to it. Like, dude, get educated. Like, go, whether it's a vocational, whether it's college, like just acquire a skill, like more skills, right? Like don't stay stuck with what you think you got, what you learned in your MOS during your time in service. As far as like the TAPS program, I mean, it's forgettable, right? Like there's just not much that everybody's just, I just want to get out, right? Like everyone's like, just let me go home and just get the hell out of here. But definitely take advantage of your GI Bill. I mean, which is kind of like, don't get in too much trouble because you still need to get out with an honorable discharge so that you can actually take advantage of these, because so many of my buddies did not get that honorable discharge, right? And they kind of shoot themselves in the foot after the fact. Right. So there's you can upgrade your discharge after the fact. I don't know if a lot of people know about that or not, but there's paperwork that you can do to upgrade your discharge so that you can actually at some point use your GI Bills if you think that your discharge status isn't going to help you. But if you decide to, and like you had mentioned earlier, like get a mentor. But even beyond a mentor, like, so veterans, when they go to college, a lot of veterans we're considered like new resources because you're not going to college straight after high school or anything like that. You're an older person, at least a few years older than the rest of your peers. There's resources out there for you, right? Not just like the Veteran Center, but also just realize like when you're in college, people want to actually help you. Like your professors do care, and they will, help you. And that's something that I never took advantage of, right? Like I was always you're not alone, right? That's another thing. It's just like you are not alone in this process. Like, you just need to open yourself up to get help. And I think that's like the most difficult thing for anyone, right? It's just having that willingness to I guess, make yourself feel uncomfortable. Like, just you just have to be willing to get out of your little comfort zone. And yeah, you may stumble your words, you may not know how to talk professionally, you may not know who to reach out to, but there's people that are dedicated, that their sole purpose in college is to help you, succeed and realize that, right? For hard charges like ourselves, in the infantry, like all that division between infantry and non-infantry, that goes out of the window once you're out. Like,
oh yeah,
bro,
definitely, definitely. I tell you what, my perspective changed when I went downrange and had to work with the Marines and work with so many different branches. And I have the utmost respect for the Marine Corps after having worked with them several times, especially during the whole election phase in Iraq and some of the things that I saw them do, and all that pre-war stuff with the Marines versus the Army and versus the Navy or whatever, man, that goes out the window when you're downrange and you're in the thick of it,
completely.
right?
Yeah, completely, right. And then I don't know, like one of the things that has helped me, and it's not because I like want to minimize the choice I made to join the military, but that's a phase of our lives.
Right.
It's not the rest of our lives, right? It's a phase. And I think that a lot of guys and gals have that, because, I did realize that, like, these are the most formative years of our lives, fresh out of high school, right? Like, this is like what you're put yourself through. That's not normal. Like, that military world is not the normal world. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people need to own that and just realize, like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Because I have a bunch of guys like, oh, nothing will ever be the same. Like, I wish I was back in. Well, dude, then just stay in. Like, right. Just stay. Just do your 20 years and plus and just retire. Like, just stay in there if that's really what you want to do. But like, you have to make that realization that, like, once you're out, you're out. You're out. Right. You're out. You can never expect the civilian world to be the same as the military. Just not. There's no one's out there going to boot camp to be a civilian, right? Like, that doesn't exist. Right? So, like, there's just to make peace with that, and there's no one. Unless you're a veteran, no one else is going to have that experience that you have. But at the same time, you can't demand that other people kind of have some sort of pity for you, or demand that people like recognize your status as a veteran. They're like, no, dude, like, we all did this voluntarily to ourselves, right? Right. No one forced me to join the Marine Corps, right? Like, I did this on my own. Yeah. I think that if we just, it would be helpful, right? Like, to transition. Is that the transition happens here? Right. It happens in your head. Like, that's where the transition really happens. Right. You just have to really be open to it, right? Like, realize, like, you know what? Yeah, I'm out. I am out of the military. I am not there anymore. I cannot expect civilians to keep up with me in certain regards, right? Right. Like, it's different, right? Yeah. I totally agree. You are totally different. It'll always be a part of you. Yeah. But you shouldn't be angry at anyone else about, what you had done and what they hadn't done. I totally agree with you on that. But Estefan, if anyone out there who's listening to this podcast might be interested in contacting you, is LinkedIn the best way to connect with you, or maybe there's an email address? So LinkedIn is a good way. I can have my email out there. I do have an Instagram page as well. So any of those social media platforms, you can call my office. Okay. Emailing me is probably the best way to get in touch with me, though, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, because you have a very fascinating story throughout your life. You've overcome a whole lot. Extremely intelligent man right off the bat, and with real wartime experience, has survived some serious traumatic situations in your life, man. And anyone listening to this, you can scroll down to the show notes. I'll make sure that I link Estefan's contact information, everything that he wants to put out there.
Sure.
But if you're thinking about following the same path as Estefan, as far as, going into getting his Juris Doctorate and then becoming a practicing attorney, by all means, seek his assistance, his help, his guidance. Really appreciate your time today, Estefan. I know you're extremely busy and you put aside some time, and I know you were sick recently, and really glad to see that you're able to make our podcast today, and maybe we can do something in the future. But
for sure, man.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate that on the Morning Formation.
Anytime, man. We all got stories, so I'm proud. I'm happy to share mine.
No doubt. And for everyone else out there, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I just want to remind you to stay tuned, stay focused, and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out. You've been listening to the Morning Formation podcast. I hope you found today's materials helpful and of value to your current situation. You can connect with me on Instagram at _morning_formation_podcast, or you can connect with me via email at theformationpodcaster@gmail.com. Also, I would like to thank my partners at Act Now Education for their support. Authenticity, community, and trusted is what you can expect from all members of the Act Now Education team. You can link up with them today and learn about some new free educational resources on their Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or at their website, actnoweducation.com. Whether today's show took you back to a nostalgic time or helped you think about tomorrow, thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe and stay motivated. Warriors, fall out.